God has called every one of us. You know, the old mindset is, well, just pastors or missionaries or worship leaders have a call of God on their life. No, every single human being, if you are born again, God has placed a call on your life, and that call is to build up the church in various different ways.
How do you discover God's purpose, God's calling for your life? Everyone has a unique calling, and I think people get confused on what that is, what that looks like. And today it seems like everyone thinks their calling is just to be famous, right? Just to be on TV or, to be, have your own reality show or YouTube channel or whatever. And I think we're missing something. And so could you just unpack with us, how did you discover your calling? Let's just start with that.
With me, it's very interesting. As a young boy, I remember going to the Catholic Church and I was scared because I felt something tugging me. Now that was before I really wasn't sensitive to the Lord anymore. And I remember then, as a full-on sinner. I mean, I did what sinners are supposed to do. I sinned really good. And I remember once I got saved in my college fraternity at Purdue University, that little pull towards ministry came back. But honestly, Bill, ministry was the last thing I ever wanted to do because every minister I'd ever met was weird. Now, I have to say this, please. I grew up in a town of 3,000.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'm a Catholic boy. So my concept of ministry is either you never get married, which that scared me like crazy,
right.
Or if you end up as a pastor, there was only one pastor in that little town that I knew, and he had a very smelly house and really weird kids, and I was like, okay. So I resisted it and resisted it and resisted it, and finally, a couple events occurred with me that got my attention. One was I was studying engineering, and as a co-op engineer, we would work at IBM for a semester and go to Purdue for a semester. And we were celebrating an engineer's 38th year with IBM. And there was 14 engineers sitting around the room. They're all drinking their coffee. I can't drink coffee. I got too much energy for that. So anyway, I'm just sitting there talking with them while they're drinking their coffee. And this guy says, I've hated every day I've walked in here for 38 years. And everybody laughed in the office except me. I was horrified.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, why did you do it? And he said, and he got a little upset with me. He goes, John, it's a job. You earn money so you can eat and buy clothes. And I was like, shut up, Bevere. And I remember, I didn't say another word in that office, but I made a note in my mind and in my heart. 38 years from now, I will not be saying what he's saying.
Wow.
And I remember my senior year, that was my junior year that happened. My senior year, I called my mom, and you try doing this with your Roman Catholic Italian mother. I said, Mom, I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving. And her first thing was, what are you going to eat? And I said, Mom, don't worry about it. And I fasted. All my fraternity brothers went home that Thanksgiving. I fasted. And I said, God, I got to know why you put me on this earth. And as a result of that fast, God gave me glimpses of things I didn't do until I was in my 50s. I have it written down, dated the 1981, and yet I didn't see some of the fulfillment until I was in my 50s. Now, that's what God always does. He shows Joseph, you're going to be a great leader. Your brothers are going to serve you, right? But he doesn't show him the pit, the slavery of 10 years, and the dungeon of 2 years.
Right.
He shows David, you're going to be, a leader, but he doesn't show him living in the wilderness for the next 14 years of your life and making pillows out of rocks.
Right.
So, God showed me that, but I had no idea the road that I was going to travel. So the first thing, though, that I think is so important to say to everybody that's watching us is that God has called every one of us. The old mindset is, well, just pastors or missionaries or worship leaders have a call of God on their life. No, every single human being, if you are born again, God has placed a call on your life, and that call is to build up the church in various different ways.
It's good. It's good. So you're telling me that I don't have to be a pastor, I don't have to be a minister, I don't have to necessarily, get a paycheck from some kind of church or, religious institution. I can be just as called by God working at a local, college. I can be just as called by God being in the military. I can be just as called by God, selling cars at the local car dealership.
A friend of mine, he's actually where my son's interning right now. He he got saved in the early 90s, and all that was preached in his church is, hey, the only way you can serve God is be in ministry. So he became a youth pastor. And he was a youth pastor for 5 years. And he said, John, I couldn't make ends meet. I was having to clean houses just to survive.
Yeah.
And he said, finally, after 5 years in prayer and listening to a man of God, he realized, wait a minute, I'm not called to ministry. I'm called to the business world. Now today he has, I think, 5 different states. He's businesses in 5 different states. And he's given over $1 million into the kingdom.
Wow.
Another friend of mine, I love this man so deeply. He was raised in the church, and he thought the only way I can really serve God, because he said, John, I had a passion to serve God, is to go to Bible school. So he did, and he went for 2 years, and then he interned in a church on the 3rd year. He was accused of sleeping with a girl in the youth group because he was interning in the youth group of this very large church. And he said, John, I never slept with her, but the elders believed her. So they threw me out and they took away all my credentials. He said, John, 3 years of work completely gone. And that's a lot when you're 21 years old. So he said, John, to be honest with you, I sought God like I've never sought God before. And he said, God speaks to me and said, I didn't call you to ministry. I called you to military. And he was like, whoa. So he went to the Air Force, the Marines, he went to the Army, nothing. He said, the last one's the Navy. He's sitting in the recruiting office. He has no idea, absolutely no idea what a SEAL is. But the guy's reading down the list and he says the word SEALs. And when he does, he goes, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to do. The recruiter goes, no. 90% of the guys flunk out. You don't want to do this. All of us have flunked out in this office. He goes, no, that's what I'm supposed to do. What neither of them knew was that he didn't know how to swim as a SEAL. And there's a reason, because he had tubes put in his ears because his ear canals were so narrow. And he said, John, if I just got a couple drops of water in my ear, I was in excruciating pain. So he had to teach himself how to swim, pray through the pain every day and say, God, I'm believing you to heal my ears. He said, one day I go down 2 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, totally nothing.
Wow.
So now he's in SEAL training. He steps in a hole on the beach on the last week of SEAL training and tears everything from knee down to ankle. His Navy SEAL physical was that week. He said, if you flunk the physical, you can never become a SEAL.
Wow.
I go into that physical. He said, the doctor flunks me. He said, Doc, this is what I know God has called me to do. You can't do this. And the doc says, are you questioning me? I'm an officer. He said, no, sir. And he left. And one of his friends saw how dejected he was. He said, hey, why don't you come to this Bible study a bunch of us have been going to? So he goes to the Bible study. Well, he doesn't know this. The guy leading the Bible study is an officer above the doctor. And you know what he's teaching them? How to be led by the Spirit. And you know what he says? He says, you know, like yesterday, I had an application come across my desk. The doctor denied him on the physical. I felt it was wrong, so I overrode it. After the Bible study, he found out he was the one.
Wow.
So
I got chills. That's so crazy.
He's just retiring this year after 20 years. He's not only a Navy SEAL, he's a Navy SEAL instructor.
Wow.
I remember we sat at this restaurant and him telling me this story for 2 hours in Hawaii. I was doing a conference in Hawaii and I heard that he wanted to meet me, and a Navy SEAL instructor wants to meet me. I'm going to that dinner. And I remember calling Lisa when I got home. I said, Lisa, I've been in the presence of a man of God for the last 2 hours. I've had probably the most rich presence of God in a dinner I've probably had before.
Wow.
And yet he's a Navy SEAL instructor. I mean, he was telling me stories of their combats for like an hour and a half, like his phone turning itself on a crossfire ambush, calling his mother, who just happened to be in her prayer group. They pray for the safety. They should have all been dead. They get the Al-Qaeda, they get out. None of them are injured. I mean, stories like that, you're just going, okay, you're called to be a military. And so that's the first thing every one of us have to understand. And sometimes the callings that are so important to God and so important to life are insignificant in men's eyes. I mean, I believe it's a great calling to be a mother. I believe to raising children is a great calling. And mothers sometimes can go, well, I'm not doing anything for God. What are you talking about? God has entrusted you the lives of these children. You know, I look at my wife. Lisa knew she was called to speak and write. Lisa's a New York Times bestseller. She speaks to tens of thousands of women, right? but she looked at me and she said, John, I know I'm called to travel, but I know I'm first of all called to raise these 4 sons. Where would my sons be today had my wife, been anxious and wanted to be out on the speaking circuit? My wife realizes that to be in ministry is service. Yeah. It's not glamorous. You're not out there trying to build a name for yourself. She was just like, God, I really don't want to do this. I mean, she lost an eye when she was 5 years old to cancer. She got out of the required speech course in high school. She got out of the typing because of depth perception. What does she do now? She speaks and she types books.
Wow.
I mean, so
crazy.
And you know what Lisa used to say to me? She said, I hate women. I don't like women. It bothered me, Bill. It really bothered me. And so I come in from this meeting one day and she's just got tears in her eyes and she'd been crying for 2 hours and she said, John, I said, God's been in this room. She said, yeah. He told me, Lisa, you don't like women, do you? And she goes, no. He said, Lisa, I love women. And she said, John, I've been crying. I have such a passion for women now. Wow. And so I've watched her just literally her heart break over women. That's a calling. That's somebody who said, God, I'm your girl. I'll do whatever you want. And God ends up having her do what she really didn't want to do. The last thing on earth I ever wanted to do was to be in ministry. My plans were to go to Harvard, get my MBA, and then go into corporate management and make a lot of money, marry a pretty girl, take 3 vacations a year and tithe to my local church. That's how I was going to serve God. Yeah. But yet, the last thing I wanted to do was to be in ministry, yet God's like, and now I look at it and I'm like, I can't imagine doing anything else but what He's called me to do. And so that's the first thing. When you delight yourself in the Lord, when you passionately love Jesus, He will place His desires in your heart. So what I thought would be a horrible life of ministry, and I said that to God. I said, God, if I live in a shack, I got weird kids, or I end up, in Africa with nothing to eat, I said, I'm gonna preach because you want me to, and I love you that much. When you love God that way, He puts His desires in your heart. Now the thing I dreaded, I absolutely love doing, and it's my life. Wow. So that's number one.
Friends, no matter what trouble you're facing today, God has already provided the wisdom, courage, and strength you need to stand. For your gifts of support in any amount, we're going to send you Joel Osteen's new book, You Are Stronger Than You Think. Please go to tbn.org/stronger than, and thank you for being a part of this global television ministry.